the recorded voice to tell us, and not me this time. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Thank you for allowing us to go and get a quick hot drink, and we will continue. Our next item is item 9C at Wotton, and I have Carl Alderton, who's an objector. If you'd like to come sit on the right-hand side. Steve Dorrington, who's the applicant. Steve Dorrington. Oh, yes, sir. Come and sit on the right-hand side. And I've got Councillor Cadell, who's the ward representative. Also, if you'd come sit on the right-hand side.
Chairman, sorry, I need to declare a personal prejudicial interest because I have a property adjacent to the site on Church Road.
And you're going to leave the meeting. Okay. There's no lunch out there, so you can't pinch anyone's sandwiches. Okay, over to you then, please, Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application seeks permission for the siting of 6 mobile homes for occupation by members of staff of Dorrington House and their families for a temporary period of 3 years. The land lies to the northwest of Dorrington House and is currently in part used for storage, with the concrete bases, as can be seen there, left over for 3 units for a previously approved scheme for 6. There's also some lighting left over from the previously approved scheme. The site lies in close proximity, as you can see, to the garden boundaries of 2 residential properties to the north of the site. The site lies inside the Wotton settlement boundary. As touched upon, the site has previously had the benefit of permission for the same proposal, and these permissions have been carefully noted and considered. However, these permissions have since lapsed, the last one being in 2011. The previous approval included a condition, however, that restricted the occupation to staff members only. The applicant has made clear on this submission that he intends on finding staff from abroad due to the difficulty of finding affordable staff here, and that the homes will therefore be occupied by the staff members and their family members and dependents. As a result, given the numbers of the units proposed, the concern is that this could result in a significant number of people congregating on and near to this shared boundary. It's just a block plan showing the siting of the 6 units. So whilst the high demand and need for the care home and level of care nationally is noted, and that it needs to be fully staffed to operate to its full capacity, the additional staff are required, and that additional staff are required to enable this. When it comes to the planning balance of the scheme, it's considered that proximity of these units to that neighbouring boundary is such that noise and disturbance is likely to occur to a significant and unacceptable degree, and that overlooking is also likely to occur from some of the mobile units, given the presence of windows in the elevation facing this shared boundary. Just running through the 3 proposed mobile units. The Town Council has raised objection on the basis of overdevelopment and the lack of restriction in terms of possible numbers of people and also traffic movements. There have been several objections locally raising concerns in respect of the need for the development, the noise and disturbance issues and privacy, as touched upon, lack of screening, potential wildlife impact, drainage and lighting. These are fully covered in the officer's report, but to conclude, the harm overall to the neighbour amenity by allowing the development is considered in this instance significant and does outweigh the need for the accommodation, and as such the proposal is recommended for refusal. These are just some pictures of the site taken from the neighbouring boundary. with the 3 concrete bases there in situ. It's looking towards the access. It's the site of the other 3 units and the entrance there. That's me, done.
Okay, don't get rid of that. Could you dot along this? I mean, I counted 5 units, so no will show more on the other one. Keep going somewhere. There was there. Oh, that's the original. Wasn't it?
That's the site plan taken
Oh, it was
from
originally
a
for 5.
previous.
Ah,
It was for 6.
I was
So,
for 6.
yeah.
That's what I thought. It was always 6. Never mind. Okay. Okay, terrific. Is it one down there? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, just slightly off the plan. Okay. Yeah, terrific. I just want to make sure we're on the right page. Okay, let's have a look. We've got Councillor Cadell. Would you like to go first or last? Okay, thank you. Carl Alderton, please, who's an objector. You have 3 minutes, sir. If you can make sure your microphone's switched on. You've got it. Well done. Far away. Terrific.
Okay, so what I've tried to do is to do a visual representation of what we think it's going to look like, because we've not seen any site plans from a neighbouring perspective. So my boundary, in fact, I live in the house on the top left-hand side, number 2. This drawing is actually done to scale. So what we did is kind of mapped where the existing bases were and kind of extrapolated those across to show the 6 of where the vans would be. Each van's going to need 2 wheelie bins. We are concerned about the smell that that's going to generate. Obviously, there's going to need to be vehicles for families as well. I do recall noting somewhere that there could potentially be up to 2 vehicles per van, plus 1 disabled space as well. So therefore 13 vehicles. As you'll see on the top right-hand side, this is a picture from my garden. We have a 1.8 metre fence. We would clearly see 3 of the vans because they would tower over the top. The vans go from 3.2 to 3.46 metres high. Our boundary is only 1.8. And then on the bottom right, you'll then see also kind of a longer view down the garden of what we think that would look like for us. Next slide. A similar view, exactly the same, but what this one really shows is, because our houses are kind of angled, we will have a clear view of the site directly looking at our downstairs and upstairs windows. As I mentioned, I'm number 2, our neighbours number 1 have raised similar concerns as well. So from a visual perspective, it's going to be quite damaging for our property, and we're obviously worried about the amount of people, because if you're bringing families from overseas, they could have children as well. That's going to develop quite a lot of noise. Next slide. So, for us, we think the site is too small. It has already been highlighted by the parish council as well, that they agree the same. At the time, we said, what does temporary mean? We understand that's now 3 years. Well, 3 years is a long period of time. It's not keeping with traditional dwellings. And our view is staffing issues at the care home, while we sympathise, shouldn't be at the detriment to us as residents. For us, our main issue is impact and loss of privacy in all aspects of our living, our garden, our downstairs and our upstairs. The caravans with the windows and the height will look directly into our properties. And for me, in my particular house, it's down the entire length of our garden, the whole length of the boundary. And it's a substantial increase in noise pollution with potentially 6 families. Now, each caravan can host between 5 or 6 people, depending on the model. That's a lot of people. And actually, the caravans proposed are not fit for purpose. These are holiday caravans, which aren't designed for any more than 6 weeks continual use, as per what the applicant submitted, and it does not conform to the standards. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, there. Okay, terrific. 2 minutes 57. Well done, sir. Okay, I've got Steve Dorrington, please, who's the applicant. 3 minutes, please, sir. Oh, before you start, because I just said there were, Mr. Dorrington brought photos in this morning. Have you all seen them? They've been passed about. Everyone seen them? Sorry? Could someone's got them? Just pass them to Councillor Kybird. If you'd like to do 2 jobs, which is look at them and listen to Mr. Dorrington's presentation. Sorry, Mr. Dorrington, carry on, sir.
Oh, on the front, there's a speaker, say mic underneath
It
it.
says Mike, M-I-C.
Middle.
You're on. Away you go, sir.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've got the notes from the agenda, and to put people's minds at rest, we have elected, it's only going to be qualified nurses with first level training to UK standards, and these people have all got degrees, and it's not really, I've checked with my wife, and there are no children coming, the families, it's just going to be the nurses. Some of the nurses, other halves are nurses too, and if not, they will be employed as well. That would be a condition. We only want them if they can drive, work in cleaning, kitchen, laundry, office, and even IT, because we've got a no care home. As for access and car spaces, most of these people from 44 years experience, they don't have their own cars, and that's the advantage of being in town, is that they don't need cars. There is oodles space. The access is superb. There's been it's been considered by the environmental health officer. That's good. Car parking is underutilised at the moment, which you can see from the photograph, and my photograph is actually showing more cars because I took that at a busy time. The staffing shortage in care homes is critical. We are purpose built. We serve the hospitals. Majority of our residents come from hospital. They're past going home. They're end of life. Our fees are the same for social services as they are private. That's been my policy for 44 years. And so there's no issues when they run out of money. We go the extra mile. If we don't take some of these people with dementia, they will end up in Northampton, Hurst and Edmonds, or Ipswich, because that's where the contract places are. As you know, there's lots of issues with healthcare. The drainage was first designed in 2003 to take on board what our proposed development was extra housing with care, something between at home and in a home, but it's not the greatest time to develop with all of the supplies and shortage of staff. So we're as reluctant to do this as anyone else, to be honest. This is a last ditch resort. The accommodation comes off of existing mobile home parks, which are occupied for 11 months of the year. They are winterproof, they've got central heating, and they have got double glazing, so they're fit for purpose, definitely. And they're quite modern, and as you know, you have to wait now a queue to view a rented house. We have got other accommodation in Dereham and Wales and in Watton, but we're full everywhere. This is a very much last resort, and it will be under the jurisdiction of us. And that's viewing, you know, I don't know if anyone's had a site meeting, but you're welcome to attend.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cadell, please, and you have 3 minutes also.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish to speak against this application. The area in question is already overcrowded, and this application would in effect cause a ghetto-like effect on an already small area. The houses nearby would undoubtedly be subjected to noise and light pollution, and the excess use of our already stretched services would not cope with such an increase in human usage. I understand there is a shortage of carers in this country. I know this firsthand. However, there is not a shortage of available workforce. My feeling is if wages were attractive, then the need to bring labour in would not be needed on such a grand scale. Therefore, the caravans would not be needed in the first place. This, I understand, would not be a reason for refusal, but the unnecessary overcrowding is a reason. That, along with an increase on an already busy road with more movement and no clear access, more cars parked, etc., the noise pollution and lighting overlooking houses adjoining are all clear reasons to say no.
Terrific. Thank you very much. It's open to questions from members. Anyone wishing to, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's we can understand both sides of this. Care homes are needed, and staff is a shortage as well, because I do know personally from Kingsley Homes. The overlooking light pollution, I think, is a two-way thing. We're looking at the plans.
Is there a question?
Yes,
Is
there's
there-
going to be a question for the applicant. Could the fence at the back where the properties are be hired from 1.8 to help with screening? You want to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I'm open to site meeting with this gentleman here to see if we can locate them any better because there's only 3 pads. The first 3 pads, you'll note from the drawing, you can see where the van stood. There's 4 meters before the concrete ends and there's another 4 meters before the fence. And I noticed this gentleman, he's put up some stuff in that which is welcoming. On a trestle, which at some stage will be completely obscured. All the Church Street houses you cannot see because the Leyland defence is 20 foot high. And again, we are 4 or 5 metres from the boundary, which is inside the hedge. And the other properties on Norwich Road, we're 100 yards from them.
Okay, thank you. That's answered. Thank you. Do I have any further questions from members at all? Councillor Martin?
We do look at amenities, Mr. Chairman, and the applicant said about putting the fence at the back. I mean, it's quite logic to put an acoustic fence along the back there, which will do the sound and avoid lighting or whatever. So, I mean, if he's mentioned he's welcome to make some amenity progress for that, I could support that.
Okay, Councillor Gilbert?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Dorrington, you did mention that the people coming would be nurses and their spouses in effect. But with the application as it is, they could be one nurse, parents, children, because it's open to, it says family members. So there would be no restriction, would there, on people who could come?
In hindsight, that was a mistake. That never was the intention. We've got accommodation in Watton, Dereham and in Wells, and there are no families. If the husband comes over, we will make that as a condition. He would have to be working for us. And I will help these people try and find accommodation where they can have their families and they want, if that's what they want. And the sooner we get this sorted out, and hopefully you cannot get local staff, not for love nor money. You can apply for office and get 96 applications. You apply for carer, you get absolutely nothing whatsoever. We have done all sorts of things to try and mitigate it. We've now got more, we've got 3 or 4 activity people because they help with the mealtime experience. We've got people in the office at the weekends to open the doors. That's how dire
Fine.
it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Mark Kittle-Morris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We saw some lovely elevations of the caravans. What we didn't see was the internal layout. I just wondered how many bedrooms or how many beds there were per caravan and what the accommodation level would be through 6 of those caravans.
Yeah, we'll just get them for you. Councillor Digan, please.
With all these sort of, the applicant has mentioned a number of potential changes. At the moment, the application, I think, is probably unacceptable. Could I suggest that perhaps we defer this application and with all the sort of suggested changes, then come back in a proper sort of written down form? Because I think at the moment we'd be sort of having too many sort of changes on the hoof. But I think a lot of the changes that the applicants mentioned would be acceptable to the committee, but at the moment the application isn't.
It depends what changes you're considering, because what I've heard is, can we condition a higher fence? Yes, we could condition a higher fence in order to screen the development more from the neighbour. I would, however, suggest that we cap that fence height at 2 meters or not higher than too much higher than 2 meters, because If you go down Councillor Martin's route of an acoustic fence, you're likely to be up to 3 metres, which then has an amenity impact in my view. It is my view, members, and you can disagree with me, on the neighbouring property to have a fence of that height. Not so much the gentleman sat here, no offence, but certainly their neighbouring property who's very close to that fence, 3 metres, I consider would block out light because they have a very small garden. So, you know, it depends what changes are down to. I completely agree, councillor, that if we're talking about the repositioning of the units, then yes, that would need a further application and a consultation for consideration. I think you need to determine the application in front of you. And if on the basis of that determination, the applicant wants to go away and amend their scheme, they can do under their free go.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. What I should have said is we can also condition the occupation. Sorry, I knew there was a third thing. You noted from Lisa's presentation that she said that we already consented 6 units in this location, slightly different layout, but we consented 5 along this boundary. And we limited that by condition to the staff of the care home only. So it would be appropriate to apply that condition. If members think that that would make the development in this location acceptable.
Okay, are we there, Lisa?
So the
Yes, I've got
units,
him, I've got him.
sorry, the units sleep between 6 and 8, or can sleep between 6 and 8 people.
Although part of that would be the lounge area becoming a sleeping area at night, yes? If that holiday type,
Yes.
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 So not ideal if you're going to convert, but obviously for 2, maybe 4 people, there's obviously 2 bedrooms and then conversion of a lounge area. Councillor Martin, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. An update on the Winchester Willoughby. I declare an interest on that because I've had one for the last 8 to 10 years. A 3-bedroom, 2 toilets, shower room, and it's home from home lounge. So
Yeah.
they will sleep 6, and they come fully kitted out, everything, curtains,
And did you,
furniture, and you can pull a double bed out, convert
yeah.
settee.
And did you have a nurse when you were staying in?
No.
Or not?
Yeah, my wife.
Oh, I see. That's okay.
But that they come fully double glazed with full central
Okay.
heating. All right. That's
Thank
the
you.
best.
Thanks very much. I'm not sure if this is fully relevant or not, but could I ask why this, I believe the caravans that were there, if I'm correct, ceased in 2011, which is quite a considerable time ago. Well, when the permission
Because I'm a
expired.
good chap and I'll stick to my word, and I said I'd temporary, and we never bothered reapplying. I wish I
Okay,
hadn't now. But the accommodation is 3 rooms. The idea is to have 2 people share that van and not have families, and they won't be using the lounge. It's not in our interest either.
okay, but my question was, what has changed operationally from 2011 to now?
Well, that was a blip. That was the dawn of agency staff. We don't like using agency staff because they don't even know where the staff toilets are half the time. And at the moment, if you try and use agency staff, they frequently let you down. I
Okay.
emailed 31 companies.
Yeah, so
4 came back.
agency staff are people who just came all the time and
Yeah,
had no
agency
need to be
staff are
on site.
Disappearing off the face of the earth.
Okay.
That's the shift change from 2003. They were Indian people last time.
Yeah, that's fine. I just
Yeah.
wondered what had happened and had the building had
No, I want to get
extensions.
rid
or-
of them as fast as anyone
Okay,
else.
that's not for us to debate. Okay, any further questions from members? No. Okay, fine. So we're going to the vote on this item, which is Wotton 3PL 2022-0398, and that's a full application. Your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. Can I have a show of hands, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, and those against? 1, 2, 3. This is approved. Thank you very much. Sorry, this is refused. Sorry, this is refused. I will get my teeth in the right way around. Refused by 4 votes to 3. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're going to move on to Shibden. I should have done that the other way around. Okay. We're on, Councillor Bowes here. We're on Shibden 3PL 2020-0906. Are we okay, Lisa? Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, sir. So we're at Shibden and I've got David Hill and Colleen Langham, who are objectors. And I've got Tom Ayres, who's the agent. If you'd like to come and sit on the right-hand side, please. Okay, terrific. Over to you, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Yeah, so we're moving up the A1075 to Shipton, item 9D. So this item and site members in the committee will probably recall was before you last year, most recently. It's been one of those sites that's been before the planning committee a number of times. It goes back a number of years. Most recently, obviously, it was heard last year in May. The application is for full consent for the erection of 23 dwellings. We've got car parking associated with that, the access to Old Post Office Street, alongside that various off-site highway improvement works. So in terms of why the applications, just to summarise before you again today, the resolution last May was to for approval, subject to the entering and completion of a Section 106 agreement to deliver the various planning obligations. That did take a number of months. It's now reached to a stage where we have an agreed agreement between the parties. But obviously in that time, we've had a number of material changes in guidance and planning policy nationally and locally. So you'll be aware of the impacts of nutrient neutrality, the guidance that the Planning Authority received in March this year. Now this site is affected by being within the catchment, one of those affected, one of those protected sites. Also, there's the implementation of First Homes national requirements came into force last year. There's been some provisional arrangements for that. Go through that in more detail, and also the implementation of the green infrastructure recreational avoidance mitigation strategy. So that was again implemented more recently this year. So from the 1st of April, there's a requirement for all schemes like this that provides overnight accommodation to provide a financial contribution to mitigate for impact. So those are the key things that that drive the need for this now to be considered again at the planning committee. But also before going into the presentation in more detail, I'm going to recap through the presentation from last time. But since the report, we've had a couple of objections received from the local community, neighbouring residents to the site. Now they generally comprise the same issues raised previously, but just a quick summary that the issues raised were that the development is out of keeping with the area and there's no supporting local facilities for the development of this size. There's existing flooding issues on the Watton Road, the A1075, and flooding already occurs on the adjacent field and land to the south of the site. Water levels in the ditch that the proposals would drain into has recently reached within 1 metre of the ground level. They indicate that the drainage strategy is not accurate, indicate the pond shown on the strategy is not the one on the proposals. And a pipe which has been laid by the adjacent landowner has been laid within the recent history, and this is not shown on the drawings. I'll address those in more detail as we move through the presentation in terms of those issues. But yeah, I mean, just to remind obviously members, the application was for full consent for 23 units. And it relates to an allocated housing site. So obviously it's been with the council a number of years through different forms, but the current situation is within the adopted local plan. It is an allocated housing site that is for at least 23 units, and you can see it there. It sits on the southwest corner of Shipton. We've got the Braddon Road running to the north. We've got the A1075 obviously down here heading through Shipton. So worth noting is the conservation area boundary runs here. Residential development here has now taken place. So a bit more context around it. So residential properties bordering the site to the north and east. Got a garage site here. You can see the road layouts here. Old Post Office Street here with the access. So we've got agricultural fields to the west, allotments further down here. So we've got dwellings here, extensive garden land. So in terms of surrounding context, the same as it was previously considered last year. In terms of the site in more detail, we've got the red edge here, so that's the site extent. So the green is those areas where highway improvement works would take place, so they're off-site. I'll go through in more detail shortly on those. So we can see some of the buildings now removed. See with the previous use, I'll show some photos, but there's various structures on the site. We'll see kind of character here. These we can see moving, looking towards Old Post Office Street, the relationship to residential properties here on Old Post Office Street. So the access would come in here. So relatively kind of flat site, mixture of we've got fencing on the eastern side, hedges along the northern boundaries to the residential properties, some hedges and vegetation in the site, but relatively open overall. Slopes southwards in that general direction, and there's the access, or the existing access onto Old Post Office Street. Then there's those structures on site. Again, just to give you an idea of the site. So touched on the history. This was an application that was granted back in 2016, I think. So that was for outline consent for 23 units. And subsequent to that, an application was refused. See here for the layout, which remains the same in terms of internally within the site, but members may recall highway safety issues being a significant concern there, and that was refused in terms of the impacts on the safety and operation of the highway network, particularly the A1075 here and Old Post Office Street here. So in terms of the proposals again before us, the internal layouts are the same. It's those off-site works that have now been developed further by the applicants and were considered previously in May last year. So this is the layout before us. So 23 units. We've got a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed and 5 bed units. You generally see the central spine road, dwellings are arranged around that, some open space. We'll just run through those house types. They remain as previously considered last year and resolved for approval. So you see a kind of traditional aesthetic here, generally brick and render, pan tiles to the roofs, so single story unit there, semi-detached properties there, and again another example of the detached. Okay, go back to the site plan. So yeah, hopefully that summarises the scheme that's still before the council. As I said, it was resolved to approve last year. In terms of those main aspects that have changed since that point in time, as I said, I touched on nutrient neutralities affecting the county. Now, in terms of where we are today, as set out in the report, we're not at a stage where the authority can conclude that the proposals by way of the foul and surface water discharges from the site would not adversely affect the protected sites of the River Wensum and the Broad. So whilst work is ongoing by the applicants and the council, we're not at that stage where we can conclude that there won't be any adverse impacts. So what we're seeking today in terms of an amendment to the resolution last time is for authority for officers to resolve those issues. Now, if there's significant changes fundamentally to the scheme, then obviously that would require the application coming back to members, obviously for further consideration. But it's envisaged that the kind of mitigation measures necessary could be secured by way of conditional additional obligations in the legal agreement. The other key change was the implementation of the green infrastructure recreational avoidance and mitigation strategy. Now, the applicants have agreed to the financial contribution that's contained within the draft agreement that's before us. So the proposals before us are in accordance with the updated local policies in that regard. Also touched on the wider changes and requirements to first homes that came in last year. So there's a requirement now for all schemes of this size to provide within their affordable units 25% of those for first homes. So the report goes through what that is. Now, the proposals provide one affordable rented unit, one intermediate type, so shared ownership type unit. The affordable housing officer has already agreed that mix before the legislation came into force. And they also note that actually the agreed mix is a better provision in terms of meeting the local need. That summarises where we are in terms of the key changes from last time. Obviously, the report goes through the key considerations that were heard last time, and you'll note from there that there were objections from the parish council, particularly in relation to the number of units on site, the highways solutions being proposed. There's also a large number of objections, 39 in total. So the matters they raise are included in the report before you. I won't go into too much detail on those, but just to summarise those key aspects in terms of highways that led to the previous refusal. So again, this is as previously resolved to approve. There's a number of improvements. I'm going to run through those. So upgrading the junctions, 2 junctions, the old post office street with the A1075, and also the Braddon Road junction with the A1075, which is junction B. Introducing a new 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction on Old Post Office Street. New speed restricting gateway feature along the A1075 as you enter Shipton from the south. New footways, relocated pedestrian crossings and bus stops. So this is how the road layout, the site works at the moment. Proposed access here. The proposed layout before us is here, so we can get an idea of the scope of change is quite significant. The gateway feature as you enter Shipton here, new footpaths here either side, relocated bus stop to here, which is currently here. We've got obviously the Junction A improvements here, continuous footpath into the site to link into the new ones along the Watton Road. Junction B improvements here. So we've got additional crossings here on the Braddon Road and improvements here to all those assist pedestrians navigating the environment. Having been to site, it is particularly unclear in terms of where those routes are. So officers consider there are improvements there as a result of the scheme, just beyond the site and scheme itself. In more detail, so that was how it was previously arranged and refused. You can see the existing arrangement here was closed up and ran this way. This was of particular concern in terms of the agricultural and heavy vehicles coming off the Watton Road. So in response, we can see the existing arrangement there. So in response to that was retained, keeping that route there, which allowed the vehicles to continue in that manner. And again, southwards as well. Touched on those improvements we can see in the drawing here in terms of slowing vehicles entering the village. The other main improvements were the junction of Braddon Road and Watton Road. So here, this is the existing arrangement, allows the vehicles, heavy vehicles, agricultural traffic to continue kind of same alignment. So that was a refuse scheme where it created a pinch point really for those types of heavy vehicles. And in response, the scheme was amended to adjust this, but keep that kind of flow and alignment there. So as mentioned, when it was previously considered last year and it was resolved for approval, it was considered those amendments improved the highways arrangements and were safe. And from a highways perspective, the Highways Authority raised no objections in that regard. Just picking up on some of the objections raised by the residents recently in the application related to drainage, to particularly surface water. So again, the proposals before you again today are as the same as those resolved to approve previously. The surface water drainage strategy has been submitted. The lead local flood authority have reviewed that and raised no objections. They're happy with the proposals. And just to run through that briefly, infiltration is not feasible on the site, so they are to discharge into the drainage network in the surrounding area. So surface water be captured, stored on site, and then restricted by a flow control device into the ditch, into a new swale and ditch here, which into an existing ditch here, running southwards, and that route flows down to the Blackwater River further south. So in terms of the impacts, it would be restricted to the Greenfield runoff rate. So that means essentially there will be no significant impacts above the existing. It's there to reflect the site as a Greenfield site at present. As mentioned, the lead local flood authority raised no objections. The concerns from the residents in terms of the new pipe, that's something that we have highlighted to the lead local flood authority in terms of their legislation requirements. But in terms of the proposal before you, it's not proposed to use a pipe in that regard. It's proposed to use this ditch and swale here and discharge into the ditch here. And there's conditions requiring prior approval of the full scheme prior to commencement and completion prior to the occupation of the dwellings. So in that regard, the proposals remain acceptable. In terms of the concerns from the residents about the pond here on the drainage strategy, not showing the pond here, well, this kind of pond here is an example of what the engineers mean by a swale here. So this will provide some attenuation at this point here. So it's just merely an indicative image. So again, referring back to when it was considered last year, the proposals remain the same. Having liaised again with the lead local flood authority, they've confirmed that in terms of instance of flooding reports locally within this part of Shipton, there's no recent incidents reported to them. So again, in that regard, the proposals remain acceptable from a flood risk and drainage point of view. I'll just quickly run through the other aspects. Obviously, they're dealt with in the report, but from a principal point of view, as mentioned, it's an allocated site and house in the local plan for housing. It remains in accordance with the criteria within that policy. From a design, scale and appearance point of view, the proposals remain acceptable in accordance with policies COMO 1 and GENO 2 of the local plan. The housing type mix and sizes are acceptable in regard to policies HOU 06 and HOU 10. There's no unacceptable impacts on the residential amenity of those residents to the north and east. And any impacts on wildlife and ecology on site and the immediate surrounding area can be mitigated and enhanced through conditions and there within the report. There's no significant adverse impacts on the vegetation and trees on site. And again, there's conditions to ensure that there's remediation of the land in terms of ground gas. From an archaeological point of view, there's a requirement to ensure that further investigation is done prior to commencement. So in summary, subject to conditions and the completion of the legal agreement. Proposals remain in accordance with the policies of the local plan and the NPPF. The additional obligation to mitigate the recreational impacts of the development on protected wildlife sites has been secured within the agreement. The affordable homes provision are acceptable, and whilst no scheme to avoid the adverse impacts on the protected sites in terms of nutrient pollution from the scheme hasn't been identified, this is proposed to be resolved via officers in due course. So the application remains recommended for approval. Those conditions are outlined on pages 75 to 83 of the report pack. The authorisation is now sought for officers to secure the necessary mitigation package to secure nutrient neutral scheme. That's in addition to the completion of the draft 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got David Hill and Colleen Langham, who are both objectors, and you've got 2 minutes. Are you okay with those 2 minutes? Who wants to go first? You, sir? Okay, I'll count you down.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern is with the road system. I know they've improved it from the original position. Could you just put it back up so we can see the map, please? Particularly where it comes out by Three Ways Garage at the top. That's still a bit on the tight side for bringing long vehicles, which I'm concerned about. We move a lot of straw at harvest time, and we'd have to go across to the other side of the carriageway to get them round. Now, if that could be changed to a wider exit entrance to the 1075, that would be a major help. On the other bit, on Old Post Office Street, it now appears it's pretty narrow anyway. It now appears to be putting a footpath down the side of it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody walk down there, so I can't really see why they're doing it. And if you make it narrower, it's going to be very difficult to get two vehicles past. So, and on the, can I briefly go to the water? It's great if you can hold the water in a swale or whatever you call it until it goes out. Will that be sufficient to stop any flooding further down? Thank you. Darling.
Yes, that'd be part of the agreement that we could sort out the flooding on that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find the traffic very confusing, and also, as mentioned before, as I said, that Tufts, of course, have a lot of lorries going into that junction as well to go down to Braddon and follow that road. So yes, it is of a concern, that particular junction. Anyway, I've got Mrs. Langham. Okay, thank you. 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. In the original application, the pond was suggested as a relocation for the Great Crested Newt. The ditch and pond have now been designated as an outlet for the surface water for drainage for 23 houses. In previous comments placed on this application by professionals, it has been said that the ownership of the ditch cannot be confirmed. I have it on my deeds, which I have brought with me, shown edged in red, and was in fact a matter which was clarified by my solicitors before I purchased my property. Mr. Parfitt knows this to be true, and he has approached me via a third party to purchase both the pond and the ditch, stating it is of minimal value, it is arable land. Unfortunately, this is not the case, it is my garden. The plan clearly states a ditch across the centre of the land at the bottom of my garden, connecting to the new development. Mr. Parfitt has a right of drainage into my ditch, given when all the land was agricultural back in the 1900s. There is in fact no ditch. He has in fact installed a pipe under the ground with an adjoining pipe connection, which I have photos here, and that pipe comes out approximately 1.5 meters to 2 meters from my boundary. So the top part of the ditch will remain completely dry because all the water is directed down into my boundary. My ditch have flooded. I have photos here. Mr. Parfitt's land have flooded. It leads to that pond. The pond has access for 3 infills to come in. The main drain from the highways, the water drain, the ditch water to come into the pond, and the water for the well, if it overfills, then flows into the pond. That pond is approximately 1.5 metres from the highway. It runs down towards that area. The water will naturally drain that way, so nothing can be done about it. And as I said, that will be affected. And with the road being changed at the front, planning permission for my property was given. I enter via Road Post Office, via Watton Road, and exit via Road Post Office Street. So in fact, I more or less do a loop to get in and out of my property. And I'm quite happy with that. And I'm, you know, satisfied with how it's going on. But how this is going on, the ditch will go across the bottom. It will drain into the side and flood. To the right-hand side, the sewer plant is being built within 50, 75 metres of my kitchen. And then the road at the front as well. I'm being hit always. And just one other question. How much notification do we have to be given of planning appeals to come to committee? Well, for these to come, I got my letter Wednesday at 1:30. If I want to speak, I've got to let you know by 5 o'clock. Every resident received that letter on the Wednesday because the postmistress told me she delivered them all. I then got in touch for the case officer, and Chris Hopkinson was away on leave. He left email or he left messages for people to contact. Nobody knew who to speak to. Somebody said they will put it through. They put it through, and I got an email back from, it just says automatic. Thank you for your email. An officer will review your inquiry and provide a formal response where one has been sought within 10 working days. And that just about sums it up.
Okay, Rebecca? No?
Yeah.
Because I was notified you needed to speak quite, I'm not sure when it was, but in good time.
So we have a standard that we stick to, which is 10 days before the committee. We actually email out a greater time than that. We are not in control of the postal system, but the letters did go out on time, and we can evidence those letters go out. The lady actually didn't get a letter because she was emailed, because anyone who writes into a consultation process, so the emails are automatically sent on the day, and that was the 24th of last month.
Okay, sorry, we'll okay. Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Right. Take that on board. Thank you. I've got Tom Ayres now, who's the agent. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. My presence here is basically to confirm that we are working with the planning authority to deal with the nutrient neutrality item that has been raised by Natural England. We eagerly await further guidance from the local authorities on this matter as a whole, and how we might deal with it on sites such as this and other sites that we are dealing with. We understand that further representation has been received by the objectors that are present today, but we feel that the previous information submitted by our consultants have already dealt with these matters, so they do not need to be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, so the drainage issues that were raised, you say have been dealt with? Yes, okay, that's fine, as long as I know. Okay, members, it's open to questions. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you. It's on the drainage issues. You'll be surprised to hear. I'm a bit confused at the moment. Are we saying that the pond and the attenuation pond, which is actually not in the site, is on somebody else's land, and that is included as the attenuation pond for this development? I'm just a little bit confused between what was said. If you could put my mind at rest.
Yeah, of course, yeah, no, understandable. Yeah, no, it's not part of the required attenuation, it's part of the existing network. So the attenuation on site is these areas here, so there's crates. Sorry, everyone.
No, you're happy.
Yeah, apologies. get the image up for you. So yeah, in essence, the pond that Mrs. Langham is referring to, yeah, is an off-site pond located here. So that's part of the existing drainage network, which the proposals would drain into. It's not required as part of the proposals in terms of attenuation. That's provided for on site. So the attenuation would be provided in these areas here, and additionally also in the pipe network with restricted rates, which would discharge to the Greenfield runoff rate here, which would then go into this is part of the proposals, but this is the existing off-site network which feeds into the Blackwater River further south. Does that clarify that point?
Mrs. Langham, is that how you see it or not? Because there's an element of confusion admittedly. If you could put your microphone on as well, please. Sorry.
Sorry. What it is, the development land and the piece of land at the bottom and the pond and mine were all one property. And the bottom two parts have been sold off before I bought it. Hence the ditch stayed with my property because it belonged to the property. These bits have been sold off at later dates, and they retain the right to drain onto the ditch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it comes back to the riparian rights and responsibilities of owners of land with a watercourse or a ditch. There's requirements for the landowner to take flows from upstream to allow them to continue to flow, and there's also a requirement for them to allow that to then go on to the downstream. What the proposals are doing are upstream, so they will discharge into the land and drainage network that you own, but they don't require that as part of the proposals to meet the tests and guidance, because they're in effect providing attenuation on site, which will not make the flows worse than they are at present. Thanks.
Can I just say, when that was put in though, that was agricultural land, not building land. It wasn't houses draining into a ditch. It was just agricultural land draining into that ditch.
Okay.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Just going to make a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. I think the more we look at drainage issues, I think the only thing we know for certain is the water runs downhill.
Yeah, water issues on planning applications have become a bit of a dark art. Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Hill made an observation about a junction which he thought was inadequate, and I think you followed it up with Tufts using the same. Is that a new observation which officers haven't considered, or if it is a new observation, can that junction be improved by condition later?
Yeah, sorry if I can come back. Yeah, no, I mean, those issues were raised last year. I think Mr. Hill was here, and the objections included in the report reflect that in essence, there were improvements before you put in this drawing here, but there was still outstanding objections in terms of actually what that meant for the traffic. At the committee last year, it was still resolved that those were acceptable from a highway safety and function point of view.
Yeah, I didn't just throw Tufts in the mix. It was mentioned last time, and I just wanted to mention it again, just to emphasise that we're not just talking about this gentleman having the odd trailer going there, that it does get some usage from other well, obviously other vehicles that would need to go down the road anyway. Okay, any other members wishing to ask questions at all? Okay, thank you. So on this item, which is at Shibdom 3PL 2020-0906, at Shibdom, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think we've highlighted some of the points, and I would hope that the agent will take them away and converse with the applicant themselves. And we'll hope that eventually we might see something done for this, so we don't have to keep seeing you guys back again. Nice to see you, but not in these circumstances. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Oh, yes.
Do we need to note delegations as regards nutrient neutrality?
Well, yeah, that's covered anyway. Yes, thank you. Item 10, applications determined by the Executive Director of Place, which is there for your information. And item 11 is the appeals. Again, it's there for your information. With that, I close this meeting. Thank you. We'll stop recording.